Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's so wonderful to meet with neighbors of the reservoir in person again and online. My name is Catherine. I'm the program coordinator at Wachusett Reservoir. One of my jobs is to reach out and tell people how we manage and protect the water supply here at Wachusett Reservoir. Provides clean, drinking water for over 3.1 million people in Massachusetts. And so we have a presentation for you tonight. It's going to be from rangers on our staff. We have Will Anderson and Andy Blake to share what they know about the reservoir. And then at the end of the presentation, there'll be time for questions. So as you're watching, try to keep track of the questions that pop up in your mind, and we'll have a discussion at the end.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out today. As Catherine said, we're going to be going to do a presentation on the history of the creation and construction of the Wachusett Reservoir. It's going to take about an hour or so. The history of the metropolitan water supply prior to the Wachusett Reservoir. So the way that I was kind of describing it to Will the other day was like it's the Wachusett isn't a standalone entity. It's part of the larger system. Okay, so it's almost like trying to describe a car by only describing the transmission of the car. Or, you get the idea. Okay, so if you're wondering why I'm not talking about the Wachusett Reservoir, straight after that, Wachusett Reservoir. These are the things that we're covering tonight in the talk. Why build the reservoir? When was it built? And how was the reservoir built? Okay. Settlements of the Shawmut Peninsula, city of Boston. First source of their drinking water was really one spring, and that was really why the Puritans settled in that particular spot. It was a nice, clean spring. And what you'll find as you go through the next series of slides is over time, of course, the city of Boston grows, the population grows, and as the population grows, they have to reach out to find more sources of drinking water. Okay. So early on, there's that spring. They utilized some cisterns that were like catchment basins for rainwater. All right. Over time, as the population increases, cisterns are going to get dirty. Spring might not be enough to handle the population. All right. So 100 years later, 150 years later or so, the real first water wasn't necessarily public water supply. The first water supply was put into use, and they utilized Jamaica Pond, right? And it was really kind of more for folks in town. It wasn't like this water was getting piped to every resident of the city of Boston. It was more like you had the money to pay to get water pumped either to your house or at least nearby your house. And neat little image down here. These are images of some of the wooden logs. They basically hollowed out tree trunks and buried them as the early piping system. Right. And occasionally, I don't know about recently, but at least in the last 50 years or so, doing construction work in the city, you'll find one of those logs right there. 1848, the population has increased to 180,000 people, and 1848 is an important date because this is when Lake Wachusett was put in service. And anyone know Lake Wachusett from like Natick and Framingham, that area? Now it's a state park. There's a lot of cottages and houses around it, but in 1848, leading up to 1848, Lake Wachusett was actually enlarged a series of ponds. So there were a series of a few ponds that they enlarged and connected and created Lake Wachusett, and that was really the first public water supply in the country. So in the city of Boston, right? And what you see here is the gatehouse at Lake Wachusett. It's a little later on, in 1910. And these images here are etchings or drawings of the celebration when they first turned on the water. And this is, I believe, the frog pond. And there are some write-ups about how important this day was. I think you could probably equate it to like the Patriots parade, or when the Red Sox win the World Series. It was a massive event and church bells ringing, et cetera, et cetera.
No school for the kids.
Yeah, no for the kids. Yeah, or like no working factories for the kids.
More accurate.
Right. And there's another image of that day, celebration that day. So by 1870, the population has almost doubled to 250,000 people, right? Tons of immigrants are flooding into the city of Boston from Europe primarily. Lake Wachusett is not keeping up with the demand. 1870 is also an important year. Actually, 1872 is an important year. That was the year that of the Great Fire in the city of Boston, which was a massive disaster. Burned like 65 acres of downtown Boston, hundreds of buildings. I think like 700 buildings burned. And the thing with that one, it was a drought year, and they almost drained Lake Wachusett by trying to fight the fire. Raged for days and days. All right, so after the Great Fire, it was like, okay, we really need to find some more sources of water. So they went out to Framingham, what we call the Framingham reservoirs. In 1878, they built the Foss, the Brackett, and the Stearns reservoirs. And then in succeeding years, the Ashland Reservoir, Hopkinton Reservoir, and Whitehall and Sudbury. And one thing I would just say about the Framingham reservoirs that you can keep in mind for later on, when they built the Foss, the Brackett, and the Stearns, they didn't prepare the land. Okay, they just basically dammed up the waterway, cut down the trees, and flooded the little valleys. All right, they didn't do anything other than just that to the land, and the water quality was poor because of that. And this was like a learning experience for them later on down the road. We'll see what I mean now. Okay. So here's some historical images of building the Sudbury Reservoir Dam. You can see some of steam engine machinery, steam winches, and pulleys laying the granite blocks. This is a floating dredge at the Sudbury Reservoir. Actually using that propeller on the front to like chop through the mud and suck the mud into the pipe and pipe it off into the distance. This slide is showing the metropolitan district, or the metropolitan water district, and basically it's a 10-mile radius around the State House, and that was meant to be the area that was going to receive the water from the new metropolitan district that was created around this time, 1995 or something. And you can see some of the aqueducts running from the Sudbury reservoirs, the Wachusett Aqueduct to Chestnut Hill Reservoir. And what I want to say about that is, if you have any interest in waterworks history, which I guess you do because you're here tonight, I implore you to visit the Chestnut Hill pumping station at the Chestnut Hill Reservoir. This is the old Metropolitan Waterworks pumping station. It's still there, but it's a museum. It's a Metropolitan Waterworks museum, and they have great exhibits. The old massive steam pumps that would pump the water around the city. The pumps are like bigger than this room, like twice the size of this room. Very, very cool spot in the city. So as I said, 1895 Metropolitan Water Board was formed, and they were charged with finding new sources of water beyond just those Framingham reservoirs in the Sudbury, and they began exploring places to get this water from. And a few of the main proposed sites were Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, the Merrimack River in Lowell, and the Nashua River here in Central Mass. And in 1895, the acts of 1895 were passed to dam the Nashua River in the town of Clinton and take the waters from the metropolitan water supply. And the Wachusett Reservoir was built. To this day, and probably until the end of time, the Wachusett Reservoir will be the largest hand dug reservoir in the world. As Catherine mentioned earlier, Wachusett and Quabbin provide clean drinking water to over 3 million people. And there's roughly 6 million people in the state of Massachusetts, so that's half the population of the state of Massachusetts drinks water that comes from the Wachusett. So very important resource, and I don't know if you're all from Boylston, or at least nearby, but you're lucky to have this great resource in your backyard. So see an image here of the dam, kind of some of downtown Clinton there. We're off over here. Some images of the valley in 1896. So before work began on the reservoir, they sent engineers out and they sent photographers out, and they had to, survey the land. They photographed and surveyed all the real estate that was in the valley that was to be removed or demolished. So a lot of these great photos down the line you'll see of the real estate in the valley. We'll talk more about that later on in the Metropolitan Waterworks photo collection. But this photo here is from West Boylston. This is inside of what's now our gate number 22 off of Temple Street in West Boylston. There's a large cliff in there. If you walk by roads or the trails in there, you may have passed this large rock cliff. That's where that gentleman is sitting now. And he's looking towards Boylston and Clinton off in the distance. And this is that same shot roughly a few years later, 1904. You can see a lot has changed in those intervening years. You can see that a lot of trees have been taken down, and the land has started to be prepared. Like I mentioned earlier, I drew down Framingham, all right? So they removed actually that upper layer of topsoil, along with all of the vegetation, the houses, the industry, et cetera, in the valley. So huge project.
Can I just ask, what's the
Yeah.
final elevation of the water? I noticed it was 331 feet there. Is that
Today, is that what it is today?
Yeah.
They try to keep it at 390.
Oh,
Right, 391.
Yep, maximum 395. 395 spilling over the spillway.
okay.
So it still has quite a way to go.
So how was the reservoir and dam built? All right. What else to talk about in this with this photo here, as a starting point, is that, of course, the reservoir is enormous. It's basically the size of a town, more or less. So what the state did was they contracted sections of the land to be cleared out to contractors, and those contractors employed a number of laborers or masons, carpenters, et cetera, and each one of those sets of contractors, each one of those sections of land was like under the control of the one company, right? And modern day map of the Wachusett. Okay. First thing that they undertook when they were looking for a dam site along the river was a place that had a nice solid bedrock foundation. All right. So what's going on here is they're rafting along sections of the river, and they're boring down to find solid bedrock. Okay. And the site where the dam currently sits in Clinton, of course, was a perfect spot. It's a narrow spot on the river. large bedrock bluffs on either side. So that's why that type is chosen. First thing you do when they're planning to build the dam and starting to build the dam, they've got to divert the river around the site where the dam's gonna go. Okay, so what they did was build what was called a copper dam, which is just like earthworks dam, and they're diverting the river around the site where the dam's going to be built over here. Right? This is like Route 70, Boylston Street up there in Clinton. This is what's called River Road in Clinton. For some reason, we want to colloquially calling it Lower Road, the DCR. But that's the same road that you would walk along, like going from Cumberland Farms to the dam. Another shot of the copper dam, and the train trestle is being built. Here, you can see the footings down below, the granite footings that you can still see to this day. And the dam is going up here. So that's the first layer of the dam. What you
Is
see
the copper
here-
dam to prevent
Excuse
water,
me?
is the copper dam to prevent water from going there while you build the other dam? Is that what?
Yeah, because when you're building the granite section of the dam, you don't want to have the river
Right, I mean, that's,
flowing on you as
Right.
you're doing that. So they diverted the river around that the
Oh,
granite section of the dam. Does that make sense?
You can kind of see it here on the left. So they notice how the granite is different height already. On the right, it's significantly higher. What's going to happen on the left now is they were able to let that channel go into the natural river. But as they started building up on the left, they have to come up with another solution. So it just didn't continue to rise as they built the dam. So they put a giant wooden flume in, and hopefully, I think there's a couple pictures of it coming up. And it's just this massive wooden tunnel that they build around. And eventually, as they get high enough with the dam, they don't need it anymore, and the water can start to naturally rise because underneath the dam is the interconnections to flow through it and go into the river. So they were really smart to do it at the same time that they were starting all down below. They built those interconnections to get the water to move. But this is kind of in the interim of building those pipes and drains for the dam. We can kind of point it out as it goes.
I think there are more photos of the dam later on. But, so before the dam is even finished or partially finished, they started and really completed work on the Wachusett Aqueduct. But in 1898, they had completed the Wachusett Aqueduct, which was an underground tunnel that would bring water from the natural river to the Sudbury Reservoir, okay, in Southborough and Marlborough. And for the first 60 or so years of the existence of the Wachusett Reservoir, the Wachusett Aqueduct was the main aqueduct that was bringing water from the Wachusett to the Sudbury and then on into the city of Boston. Okay, so just the construction of the aqueduct is a monumental feat, and it was designed so that no pumps were needed. It was just gravity fed, so there was a slight incline for 12 miles from Clinton to Southborough. And the first 2 miles of the aqueduct are just straight through solid rock. So this is what's called the portal. This is over in Berlin. And there's no masonry or brickwork or anything like that in the first 2 miles. It's just a tunnel through solid rock. And once it gets to this site here, the portal, then they started building that masonry tunnel that you see in the next few photos here. Right? So it's like granite upper and brick lower section. And Will might be able to give you a more pressure. Yeah. People will often ask how many people died during the construction of the reservoir. I want to say it was either 8 or 13. 13, okay. And I believe most of those 13 were killed in the construction of the aqueducts. Am I off base there?
No, you're right. It's that first 2 miles blocking through rock and overhead to where the train tunnel, where they also have to blast through. And
Yeah. So
dynamite
black tar, right?
Yep.
So here we are on the inside of the Wachusett Bridge, which is over on Hudson Street in North Borough. Some of you might recognize it.
I'm familiar.
So that bridge is the Wachusett Aqueduct running through there. Interesting fact about the Wachusett Bridge during World War II, they built what they call a siphon, which is basically a pipe that went. It diverted the water from going through the bridge to a pipe that went underneath the river and then back up again on the other side. The thought was that if there was an air raid, if they bombed the Wachusett Bridge, then that would cut off the water supply to the city, and that would be catastrophic.
So did they actually build that tunnel then? Did you say they actually?
Yep. Yes.
Wow, good. That's never got bombed though, I take it.
No.
Yeah, wow,
Thankfully.
that's impressive.
And image of the inside working, blasting through that first couple of miles there.
It's pretty miserable.
Yep. Another image shows you the size of the aqueduct. And as I mentioned earlier, the Wachusett Aqueduct was connected to the Sudbury system, which could relay water to the water district by using the Weston Aqueduct, which was completed in 1803. There's a whole slew of aqueducts, and it's a lot to get your mind around. It takes me a minute to get my mind around it, but the Wachusett is the only one you have to worry about for now.
The good thing to keep in mind here with this picture too is at the dam site, things were always changing because the aqueduct was completed in 1898, but they only started work in 1896. The acts were passed in 1895, but real work didn't start till 1896. As soon as they started construction for those 2 years in the aqueduct and they got to the dam site, they were just siphoning out of the Nashua River.
Right.
But then they start building the dam. That siphon has to be moved constantly to allow Nashua River's water to get to Sudbury. And they have to keep changing the way that water is taken or moved because the dam is being built. And there's some better photos, but you have to envision, especially in Clinton and at the dam site, it's always changing. And they have to build something temporarily to make it work. Then they got to disassemble that and build something else. And it went from the siphon at the aqueduct opening to the cofferdam, to the flume, to just the dam being high enough that it could retain water and push it through the aqueduct. It will kind of walk you through it. It can be confusing, but you have to think it's always under construction until they get, 1901, 02, until there's enough blocks to hold the water back.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention earlier, I started to say, was that from what you see, when you're looking at the Clinton Dam and Wachusett Dam, what you see above ground, there's the same amount of granite below ground as well. So it's over 100 feet below ground as well. And here in this photo, you can see the opening of the Wachusett Aqueduct. And I want to say, yeah, this is in 1898. And some kind of facts here, 290 million gallons a day would be sent into the city, all right? And that's about what the city receives today. I think 290 is actually more than what the city receives today. I think it's more around 200 million. So preparing the land. I touched earlier on how much work went into really preparing the land to fill the reservoir up. Like I mentioned with the water quality in the Birmingham reservoirs, engineers who were designing the reservoirs, some of the same engineers were involved in the Birmingham reservoirs in the Wachusett, and kind of learned their lesson. And in the 1890s, 1870s to the 1890s, this is really roughly around the same time as like Louis Pasteur was only a few years earlier. The whole notion of like germ theory was taking place around this time, really burgeoning. So the idea that that there are, microbes that can live in water that can make people sick. You want to have the cleanest possible sources of water, and in order to do so, they strip the land of all the vegetation and stripped the topsoil down to a layer of clay or bedrock. And I want to say that they removed over 6 million cubic yards of soil. So, like, I think the bed of a pickup truck is like 5 cubic yards or so. So you can imagine 6 or 7 million cubic yards. A whole lot of soil. And here you can see some photos. This is in West Boylston, the Old Stone Church, off in the distance there, up on the right, the Baptist Church. Trees have been cut. This is along the riverbanks of the Natural River. All the structures were removed from the valley, whether they were demolished or moved to another location. And the next few photos will be some structures that were moved, not demolished. This house is on the corner of Thomas Street and Goodale Street in West Boylston, and it's the old rectory for St. Anthony's Catholic Church, which at one time was right next to what we call the Old Stone Church today, the Baptist Church. So that's St. Anthony's. And the parsonage from the Baptist Church was also moved. Well, do you know where that is today?
That is,
Not put you on the spot,
no, it's the same general location. So if you were coming from Thomas Street going up the hill, on your right would be the fields for West Boylston. And it's just past that on your right. But I think it's Crescent Street there. Thomas turns into Crescent Street. So you're heading towards the lights to turn right on Route 12 would be on your right.
And this is an 1898 view of that same area with the Baptist Church and the Catholic Church. I think the building off behind the Catholic Church is the Oddfellows Hall. Or
That's the Oddfellows Hall. It's the like lime green, mint green building in West Boylston too. And that's on that loop that I think is Church Street. Very prominent. They moved it. There were some changes to it. I don't know if it went all in one piece very well from what we heard, but you'd be in water too from this perspective. You'd be in Thomas Basin in the reservoir from the show.
Well, one thing I want to mention in this photo is if you take note of the circular window on the Baptist Church, the church on the right there, it's not there today. There's still a circular imprint there, but the glass window isn't there today. And some of you may know what happened to it, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The church by the 70s, the church had like fallen in disrepair and the roof was caving in, and the Metropolitan District Commission, the precursor to the DCR agency that preceded the DCR, did a lot of renovations on the church and basically just kind of like stabilized it and shored up the shell of the building. So there have definitely been some changes to the church from whatever, monumental changes to the church from what it looked like originally. So here's just another view. And this would be if you were basically standing on the Route 12 causeway, maybe halfway across the causeway or so. So this is the Masonic Lodge in West Boylston, also on Church Street. But you notice the window, same window from the church, the old stone church. And I haven't been inside there, but supposedly the pews from the church are inside there.
It's kind of like rough for the Baptists in West Boylston.
Right.
The old stone church was brand new at the time that the Metropolitan Water Board took it by eminent domain. It was built in 1896. It was only a few years old. And then it was like, hey, this is a beautiful new stone church. It was built out of stone because the previous Baptist church burned down. So they had quite the run of luck. Church burns down, replace it with the stone church. That won't burn down. Oh, but there's a reservoir that now we're going to take. Now we take your stone church and now they build the wooden church on Church Street, and I don't know what happened, but sometime 60s, 70s, it ended up, likely being sold and then, converted to the Masonic Lodge. Tough stretch there for.
But then they allowed them to keep it on the site, though, right, that old stone church.
They kept it, yeah, which is, I don't know if it was on there somewhere, but, because essentially it was made out of stone, the MDC at the time, or the waterworks at the time, decided to allow the shell to stay because there was no threat to water quality. All of the wood was removed, nothing would rot, and it was kind of like a monument to, West Boylston. They lost their second center of town. They like to think it's their original center of town. It wasn't. So, I think it was kind of like a concession at the time, and it's become what we hear is the most photographed, place in central Massachusetts.
So this is the stone church again, off in the distance there through the archway. This is the stone arch that you would drive over on the Route 12 Causeway, West Boylston. A little close-up view there. Closer view. And you can see like the tree stumps that are yet to be stripped out of the riverbank. And you can see how deep it is there too. People like to fish at that spot, at that archway, because it's really deep there, and fish like trout and salmon. In the summertime, they would go down into the deep cold water, so that's why that spot is kind of a popular site. In 1905, more stripping of the land. A few years later, 1908, the dam was completed in 1906. So the reservoir and the valley has been filling up now for a few years. You can see that the water levels come up really high. It's actually higher in this photo than it is today. It's probably a 8 or 10 feet higher.
In theory, you'll never see it this high again because the way that the spillway was built, it had a gangway across it where carts could be pushed and they'd pull up wooden flashboards, and those flashboards gave another 8 to 10 feet. They've all been removed, and there's a hydraulic press gate now, so the actual maximum capacity of the reservoir is actually less than it was. So in theory, unless there's some catastrophe, you'll never see it up to the same level as the foot of the church.
We're going to go through a few slides of some of the real estate that was taken out of the valley, and this is the home of George Keyes, which is inside our gate number 35, was inside our gate number 35, and that is off of Metropolitan Road in Sterling, just on the Sterling-Clinton Road, a little before the Sterling-Clinton line. It's at the corner of Chase Hill Road, Metropolitan Road. If you went in that yellow gate there. And George Keyes' house is now a popular fishing spot called the Cellar Hole because the foundations of his house and barn are right off the shoreline, so it creates like a deep hole right off the shoreline, and fish will hang out down there. And this is the home and barn of Daniel Carville. And Daniel Carville's house and barn was inside, or across from the Clinton District Court. It's underwater now, but in that area across from Clinton District Court. They call it Carville Basin. Okay. And this is another view of that same area. And some numbers for you. There were 360 houses that were removed from the valley. 6 mills, 8 schoolhouses, and 4 churches, amongst other things. Here's a view of West Boylston Center, as well called the dissection. And if you were going from Clinton into West Boylston, you're going over the causeway.
Yeah.
If you look to the left, that section of water that's below the huge power lines, basically in that area there, roughly. Removing the Oakdale Mill dam pond. So in that area, really from where West Boylston Center is and beyond, and then going upstream towards Oakdale and West Boylston, there were a series of textile mills, large mills, and you'll see some photos of them here as we go through. This is, actually, Sawyer's Mills in Boylston, another, center of industry. Anyone familiar with Sawyer's Mills? Sawyer's Mill was, up off of Gate 8
Narrows.
at the Narrows. If you went in behind the Tohoto School, down to the water, into the area that we call the Narrows, it's a narrow spot in the reservoir, kind of in the middle of the reservoir. In that submerged area there was Sawyer's Mills, and there are textile mills down there. It's kind of like a really center of town. I'm in water today.
It does get confusing with Boylston because there's Sawyer's Bluff and there's Scar Hill Bluff. So like Andy was saying, down Scar Hill Road are the Scar Hill Bluffs. So when you walk in our fire roads, you could be up 100 feet on a sand bluff looking down to the reservoir. That's the Scar Hill Bluffs. But when you go up to Gate 8, it's the same kind of layout of the land. It's a very high area that has like sandy bluffs, and it goes out to this point. And if you can go back to that other slide, I think you can almost see it. This area is essentially where that Narrows Bluff comes down, and you can see there's a ridge here and a ridge here, and then it goes even further down to where the ridges are.
So where's Tohoto related to that? Is it not Tohoto?
So the high school, if that's a little bit past, so it goes, if you're going up this way towards Clinton, you would go Gate 9, then Tohoto High School, and then Gate 8. And it is, if you go in Gate 8, you go straight to the water. That's that point, that Narrows point.
Yeah.
So Tohoto would kind of be a little bit behind you,
Right.
and a little bit further down, but it's in that general kind of area.
So that's Sawyer's Bluff.
That's Sawyer's Bluff.
Okay.
Yeah, Scar Hill Bluff is literally right down the street. You go on 14, you take a right, you start kind of gradually climbing. And when you get to, the edge of the tree line, it's a straight bluff 100 feet down to the reservoir shoreline. And you have to think about it, if it was a bluff before the reservoir was created, and it's still a bluff, that was 100 feet down to, and then another 80, feet down to the bottom where the valley was. So it must have been a really impressive view.
Mm.
Here we've got Clarendon Mills, which is in the area of the old center of town in West Boylston. West Boylston Manufacturing Company is upstream of that, closer to Oakdale. These are all textile mills. Picture of the West Boylston Manufacturing Company getting demolished. This is the next photo of West Boylston Center up in the distance. And this is the old Clarendon Mills getting taken down in the Beaman Cemetery. Beaman Cemetery is more or less in the area of what we call Bull Rock. So if you went in Gate 28 or Gate 30, off of Route 110, get you to the general area of where the Beaman Cemetery was. But the cemeteries were removed from the valley and graves were removed.
That road there in the foreground is East Main Street. That would go right to the Boylston line. And the Boylston line is just before Bull Rock. Unfortunately, it's well known for a illegal swimming area, but it's got a great view, and it actually looks right over that center part of the reservoir. That's basically looking over like the flag section of Boylston and Scar Hill Bluffs. It's really nice.
And looking over the area where Scar Bridge was, which was the bridge that went over the natural river that basically connected Boylston to West Boylston. St. John's Cemetery, large Catholic cemetery in Clinton. This is off of what's now called Cemetery Island. So if you walked along the North Dike, going from like Sterling into Clinton, once you get across the way into Clinton, there's like a narrow section of water that separates the North Dike from an island. That's called Cemetery Island. And St. John's Cemetery was basically like those pine trees there that you see off to the right. That's Cemetery Island now. And the cemetery was more in the submerged area. So they had workmen that had to exhume the graves, and they were brought, actually, blanking on the name of the road, brought that, South Meadow Road, and they actually built South Meadow Road in order to move the bodies from Clinton, from St. John's Cemetery to cemetery in Lancaster.
So obviously we're doing all this work, right? We've stripped the land, we're removing trees, we're removing buildings, but we've got other infrastructure, we've got roads, railroads, all things that need to either be removed or relocated. This is kind of a good shot because this is Sawyer's Mills. So think about that giant mill complex, right? This is what's left. It's deceiving because it looks like the reservoir is starting to fill, right? But this is May 1903. There was actually a ton of flooding that spring. So this is just the future basin collecting all of that rainwater. This is going to recede because it looks like the train is just going to get overtaken by water. Everything was removed, the ties, the rails, everything. And the train continued right up until the point that it literally was the last thing to be pulled, because obviously at this time, it's a major, form of transportation. And you'll see down here, the name has changed. When they do the acts, the aqueduct, the surveying and initial construction, it's the Nashua Reservoir. But supposedly they put on a campaign to name the reservoir, and what locals came up with was naming it after, an icon in the area of Wachusett Mountain. So what do we have to do to move this railroad, right? The railroad literally runs right down the river valley, pretty much along the Nashua River. So in some sections, this is up in Clinton, we call it Outlaw Pass.
So is that like by high school?
So this is behind the high school and the middle school going to the dam on that pathway, right? So you're walking through, you start seeing rocks on either side, they have to blast all the way through it. With railroads, I think they try to keep the grade down to under a couple %. So this is a lot of the engineering work that they have to do to keep it relatively flat. This is another site of Outlaw Pass coming up. There was a few fatalities here, again, because of dynamite. Supposedly a couple people died because they went to light the fuse and it went off as soon as they sparked it. So now we have to build this viaduct in front of the dam over the Nashua, right? We come down the north dike, we go through Outlaw Pass, we get to the dam, but we've got to get to the other side of Route 7. So they build the viaduct. It's about 133 feet above the Nashua, just under 1,000 feet long. Apparently it was a popular thing to jump off of back in the day. The research that I can find, it was removed in 1975. A local contractor in Berlin removed it. And again, supposedly, that contractor's family still has pieces of this viaduct in their yard. So if you go snooping around Berlin, maybe you can find a piece. Construction in 1903, like Andy said, its footings are still there for the viaduct. You can see this kind of, banking starting to form. That is actually going to be released here. That's going to be part of the spillway where the water's going to flow and the reservoir fills. So here's another good picture of the train going across, the dam construction in the background. Comes out of the Clinton Tunnel and goes across over to Outlaw Pass.
Wait a minute. That's coming out of the tunnel or going into it?
Well, I'm just saying this way, right? So the train's coming into the tunnel. Perspective is tough. Yeah. So this train's coming into the Clinton Tunnel. It's the second longest train tunnel in Massachusetts, the longest. This will pop you out if you're going in this direction towards Berlin on Clamshell Road in Clinton. And you can actually go there and look down and see the other portal for the tunnel. There's a train going over one of the many steel bridges. I believe this one is in West Boylston. This one was. So some weren't. Some steel bridges or iron bridges were left. At Sawyer's Mills up at 88, one of the railroad bridges was actually left in the reservoir. I believe it was likely deriveted and dropped and just let it stay. Because it's essentially, if it's iron, it's mineral. So they actually did side scan radar back in 2000-ish, maybe about 20 years ago. And the same company that found the Titanic found the bridge for Sawyer's Mills. So some bridges were completely removed, some like at Sawyer's Mills were left, which is actually still there. It's crazy, but that outline is there. Some were just buried into the new roadway. So you see the two bridges, right? The old stone church would be behind us. You'd be at the church looking at the Route 12 Causeway. And you see they're burying one of the bridges right in the road. Okay. This one here, kind of in the foreground, that one was disassembled. So again, we've stripped and removed all that vegetation. They're making burn piles. We've got the carts here hauling logs out, tons of millions, I'm sure, board feet of logs. You kind of see the smoke in the background. They're burning all these piles as they go. Here's a good picture of all the timber, lumber stacked up. You've got the old stone church, the Catholic church in the background. This is on the other side of what is now Thomas Basin. So like Andy said, it's right around 7 million cubic yards of soil from the valley floor. So what we kind of say with the Metropolitan Waterworks, or like Boston's drinking water supply, they learned their lessons as they went further west, and they built larger and took more. And it really was like a learning experience for the engineers and everyone. How much land are you supposed to take? They didn't take much at Wachusett. Sudbury, they took some around the reservoir, but that concept of a watershed wasn't really there yet. Like, why do we need a forest, a healthy forest around a water supply? By the time they get to Wachusett, they realize we need more land. We need a forest that becomes a filter for the water that will eventually make its way into it. So this is a dumping platform. They built temporary railroads all in the basin, right? All on the flat ground in the reservoir floor. They've got all these narrow gauge railroads set up. They've got trains everywhere. They're hauling these cars back and forth. But most of the work is horse and carriage and laborers. So the soil was used mostly to form the north and the south dikes. What is a dike? It's essentially an earthen dam. That's all it is. We have two at Wachusett. The south dike is part of Boylston and Clinton. It's right on the line. If you've ever looked out on the south dike, as you make that bend to go down, and the courthouse will be in front of you in about 3/4 of a mile, the town line marker is right on the south dike. You can see it from the roadway. That would be your marker. I'd say 1/4 of it is in Boylston, and 3/4 of it is in Clinton, and it kind of incorporates the natural lay of the land. So it's a natural hill. The dike starts, bends around, and goes back. There's that dumping platform and the carts. Another shot of these narrow gauge trains working in the basin. All these bluffs and sand bluffs. Deceiving stuff about these pictures, right? You're looking at it, you're seeing all these dirt bluffs and sand bluffs. Some of them stayed, but a lot of them, like around Bull Rock, they stripped it right to bedrock. So we've done hours and hours and hours of research trying to find Bull Rock. It's a very distinct outcropping that sticks out right to the reservoir. You can see it from the Route 12 Causeway. We're like, where is this rock? Where is this rock? Until, light dawned on Marblehead. It was covered by soil. You couldn't see it. Just a little bit of the rocks were popping out, but as they got to it, they stripped it right down to that rock. So it really wasn't getting exposed until the project was done. So we've done all this work, and we have to do new construction as well, right? It's not all about just preparing the land for flood. You have to build new bridges and roads and move the railroad, right? So this is down in the Oakdale section of West Boylston. This is what will become Union Street. This is where our regional headquarters is off of. So if you were driving in this direction towards those churches, that's Oakdale. You go over the reservoir at Thomas and Stillwater Basins, over the railroad, and then getting to Oakdale. This is in November of 1903. This is the same shot, but closer to the bridge. You can see a lot more of buildings in Oakdale. Now there's a train depot. It's now the West Boylston Rail Trail. walking on that section before. That's basically the parking lot. It's just out of frame on the left. This is the Wachusett Arches. This is what we call a 3-arch bridge. This is on Thomas Street in West Boylston. This is where the Wachusett River feeds into Wachusett Reservoir. You can see the forms for the arches. This is that completed Route 12 causeway now. You can see what's left of the berm heading up to the bridge from the railroad. Those impressions are still there. If you look at some of our bathymetry maps, which are like depth maps of the water of the reservoir, you can literally see exactly where the railroad was from the right-of-way kind of embankment that went through the valley. There's still a house off to the left. There's a holdout, but that was actually. So we've done all this work, but now we have to build the dam, right? We talked a little about it, you know, with the aqueduct construction, but now we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of building the dam. This is in 1904. So the first stone was laid June 1901. Wait a minute, everything started in 1896. It's been 5 years already. It was a 10-year project in total. Acts 1895, actual construction work 1896 to 1906. But building the dam only took about 4 years, which is incredible when you look at that. So this is John Mercer, one of the masons. He had, honor and privilege of winning the first stone. We'll see him again. And this is 120 feet, below what you can see. And that's way down there, laying that piece stone into the bedrock. So 1903, this is ashlar granite from Chelmsford. That's what the facing of the dam is made out of. So when you look at the dam, you're seeing it's still local to Massachusetts, but it's out of a quarry in Chelmsford. The interior rubble granite of the dam is local from Boylston. So you guys pretty much hold the water back. So it's on Boylston's back. So here's 1903. We're starting to build the dam. Looks like that house that was right there on the right is now gone. You can still see the footing on the road down there. I would have to look it up in digital colonial, but there was a residence right there at the right. Oh, no, it's still there. Just see it right there.
I don't know where you're from.
Looks like it's still right there.
Oh,
It's kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
Won't be there for much longer.
The foundation of that house was still visible too, up until they did some work on, there was like an erosion problem where runoff from the road up above was coming down and washing away the came down below, so they did this big erosion project, but I think when they completed that project, I'm pretty sure you can't see the foundation of the house anymore, but it was up on the hill in the woods, a little tough to see.
It would have been near where the horse trough is down below. You know that granite and horse trough is. It would have been right around the area. So another shot of the dam. This is that local granite rubble. The old quarry is all posted, no trespassing. It's just so dangerous. It's at where Route 70 Main Street meets Willow Road in Boylston. If you went in those gates, I'd say maybe a mile in, as you start climbing the hill, and there's unknown depths because the quarry filled up with water. So it's posted because of public safety issues. Because if we invited the general public in there, it would create all sorts of problems and injuries. So
And people want to rock climb along the face and everything like that.
yeah, since our mission is water supply protection and providing clean water, it's not, recreation does come second for us, and because of that, we just posted that entire area. This is the dam, 1903. You can start seeing the cableways going over. Our future ranger station is in the background. I don't know if you point that out, Andy.
I think it's this house here.
I think you're right. And then behind that, in that open area where there's only one single house, will become the future labor yard for the Metropolitan Waterworks and currently pay for PCR. So we're on the spillway side of the dam, looking towards Route 70. This is one of those cableway platforms dumping material down to the natural riverbed. You can see that flume. You'll see how it's all propped up.
That is a wooden flume moving the water from the reservoir building up. It's not going in the aqueduct and pushing it further down the National River, essentially to get it out of the way until it's completed enough that they can continue to.
Can you point out the flume?
Sure.
And visualize how it
So this is all of this is what this embankment. It's all propped up and it has like a pitched roof. And there's someone looks like they're walking on it, but they might be on the background.
Like they feeding Lancaster Mill water, that, the mill still needed the water to operate.
They still had an obligation to every mill owner that had water rights downstream. So they still had to supply, even though I'm sure the water board wanted to take as much water for the drinking water system that they could. They did have obligations to the mill owners and people with water rights further down the Nashua. So they still had to have this flume to push water down so they could get the water to do the, I think Bigelow, it was Lancaster Mills, Bigelow Mills, and textile and carpet. I'm gonna say Bigelow. Yeah, it was 1904. Now that flume's gone. Why is it gone? Because we have the fountain now. The fountain isn't in operation, the decoration. But what is working now is the lower intake of the dam, right basically at the bottom of the basin, flowing through what will be the power station. So this footprint will be the power station. Underneath here, all the pipes are done. The pipes are ready to go up into turbines to eventually generate power. The aqueduct is done with this little head house going right through the hill under the ranger station, essentially, through Wilson Hill towards Berlin. This is all now working. The bypass is working through the power station, and that water flow out into the Nashua to continue the mandated release so the river can flow and people with water rights can get it. And now you can see they're filling in where the flume was. They still got some water in it, but they're essentially now backfilling.
And the fountain's just to cleanse the water, right?
The fountain itself is what sprays up. It's purely decorative. It's just a decoration.
Oh, it's not to clean the water.
No, purely a decoration. It's only on from May to October-ish. The MWRA turns it on and off. If you go down to this area and you look in this pool, there's massive holes at the bottom of the fountain. That's where the water is being pushed up. And again, it's all gravity. You've got 65 billion gallons pushing down a pipe, and it's just pushing up through this circular, little tub here, pushing it out into the river. So here we have date on this one, I don't think, but they've made a ton of progress. They're almost up towards the top. We're almost up at where the pond will eventually be, where the flying poles are. This is 1905. Major construction is done in 1905. The last blocks are going in. It's essentially completed. The power station is up that will house the turbines. The fountain area is done. What needs to be done over the next year is finish work for a lower road and the railings on top of it. So when you think about it, 1901 to 1905 is the major 4 years they were able to build. To me, it's just mind-boggling. So here we are laying the last stone, June 1905. Here is Mercer again, laying the last stone. And you can see those giant claws that are grabbing that last block there.
You will see Mercer and the major, stonemason.
I would assume he was the master mason. He must have been. If he had that privilege of laying the first and last stone, he must have been a master mason overseeing the kind of dam construction. So again, Wachusett Dam remains the longest hand-built dam in the world. Even though there was cableways and there were some steam engines, fired by coal, it was still shoveled by hand, and most of the work was done by hand. So technically, it was hand-built. There was one more that you couldn't really touch on in New York Supply. Remember that?
What?
There was one dam just after this where some engineers moved to the city of New York Water Supply in upstate New York. I think half of the dam kind of was right after this and was hand, but then diesel engines started coming into play, so they kind of blacked out that and So those facts, 115 feet above ground, that's what you see when you're looking at the dam, just about the same below ground. You have to picture the granite going almost to the top of the archway for that fountain, 22 feet wide at the top, 180 feet wide at the bottom, it's a giant wedge. What's holding all the water back is that kind of that wedge. And it's about 1,500 feet long. So where the water, everything that's happening with where the water is going at this time is this building. We call it the power station. The MWRA calls it the lower gatehouse. It really is the same thing. So in here, water flows through now upper and lower intakes towards the top of the dam. There's still that lower one right at the bottom that can essentially drain the entire reservoir if they wanted to, that they were using during construction early on. But day-to-day basis, there's two intakes at two different elevations, flows through pipes, through the dam, down into the power station. From here, they can turn it on to the bypass, where it comes out and flows out into the river, or they can do a hybrid, where it does the aqueduct and the river, or they can shut either or off. And then when it comes through the bypass, they can also turn on another smaller pipe that does that. Some of it's shadow, but when you look at the dam today, you can see different colors in the blocks. It didn't go up evenly all the way. It kind of just went up in different heights. I don't know if it's true or not, but we've been told when they laid the mortar, they put salt in it in the wintertime to stop it from freezing. And you can actually kind of see that coming out, and you can see the different lines. And it's almost like a diagonal line up and another line up.
You can kind of see like from winter to winter, like the
Yeah.
sections going up.
So here's a picture down below, door leading into the power station, stairs I'm sure you're all familiar with, up to what we call the promenade area, where those are. Still some finish work to do for final paving. And this is a postcard of the general area in, was it 1908, maybe I want to say?
Yeah.
So you've got everything. You have the completed kind of, dam and reservoir behind it. So you have the spillway that's originally constructed with that gangway. You have to pull those flashboards up. They're not in the picture. It's open right now. You've got the railroad diverted around the valley from out of Outlaw Pass going to the viaduct. You have the spillway, which is called the waste weir. So once it hits that, it flows down and curve kind of action, and that goes into the Nashua. We call it the Greyhound Bridge. When you're below the dam, you walk over Grand Bridge. That's where it comes out. You've got a power station generating power. When they turn the turbines on, it would power giant Westinghouse generators, and they were able to power all of the Metropolitan Water Board's facilities. So their Clinton Maintenance Yard, their Labor Yard, all the houses that they owned in the area. And they were able to transmit that power all the way down to the Sudbury Reservoir, where it had more facilities. So even in 1908, it was self-sufficient with power. We've somehow gone backwards.
There's DC power.
DC. Another postcard, overflow of the waste weir. That's the Greyhound Bridge. You saw in that earlier photo, it was just kind of like an earthen banking. It went right through the bedrock and got right down. It's all a cut rock. Spillway.
Beautiful postcard.
It is. Yeah, he actually has a few of them, two original. So this is the Nashua Reservoir site, Lancaster Mills, looking upstream of the dam, 1897. And same general area in 1905. You have the viaduct, Route 70, the dam, power station. So who worked on the reservoir and the dam? So here's some engineers for the Metropolitan Waterworks. Really like these chest rigs that they have to go into the tunnels with the candles. That's really cool. All of their engineering gear. I couldn't tell you what they are. Not an engineer. So it was mostly hardworking Italian immigrants, and they worked under something called the Padrone system. I call it the Padrone system, maybe Padrone. I think it depends on singular or plural, but basically it's the Padrone system. This is a shanty, village that they lived out of in the basement of the local.
for the money to have housing, so they use.
It was brutal. It was
Yeah.
not, it was essentially, you were essentially indentured servant. You were beholden to the patron, that hired you. It didn't work out well until, some things happened later in the budget. So the pay scale. So laborers about $1 a day, labor with horse, $25 a day. Mason, $3 to $6 a day, that's not bad. Most of the masons were able to either live in, like long-term rented housing, like in Clinton, or something like that, but it wasn't very good for laborers. But here's one of the shanty towns, the ones that I'm aware of that know best is supposedly there was one on the hill behind the Clinton District Court. There's no remnants of it, but there was one there. The rest were actually in the basin where they're building the project. And when you think about it in sanitary conditions, they had to do certain things, right? Where did they do that? You know, and did they pull it all out? I assume they did, but it's just something to, think about. Pretty miserable living conditions. You see it's basically what they had laying around that made a whole lot. We've heard that there was up to 8 to 12 workers living in one shanty. It's definitely miserable. So this is, we kind of have known as like the new guy pick. So this guy here in the foreground is smiling with a white shirt. He looks like he's thrilled to have a job. This best day ever, first day on the job. Look at everybody else's face. They do not seem thrilled. So this is pretty good. We've got a horse, no time to eat, throw the feed bag on, eat while you're working. All these other guys, oh, this dude's smiling too. I never noticed that. This is really good. Maybe another guy, yeah. That's first time. Here are some workers. What we're guessing up here, they are not working. This guy's pretty well dressed, has like that bowler kind of cap. He may be the patron or one of the foremen, one of the supervisors making sure that they're working. And obviously, you can see the old silk church. Here's another shot of shanty town. I think one of these signs is advertising shoe repair. I'd have to zoom in on it. We can zoom in on Digital Commonwealth.
Yeah, there's a photo where the like front center and the cobbler that's
Cobblers there. Yeah. So you had to manage all sorts of services in their shanty towns. So the way the Padrone system essentially worked is they sent representatives from the Padrone to Italy. Italy at the time was going through a lot of turmoil, a lot of like high unemployment rate. So they actually go to Italy, people that spoke both time and English, and recruit people. Or they'd be in the docks waiting, like at Ellis or in New York, waiting for, Italian immigrants to come off of the boat, literally grab and say, I've got this great thing. We're amazing job, I've got work for you. As soon as you can get there, you're gonna get fed, we have beer, we have housing, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah, not so much. So with this system, they basically start working, but they have to pay the Padrone for everything. They have to buy their food from them. They have to buy all of their commodities from them. They have to pay for that house, that shack. They have to pay for it. So essentially what we kind of found, by the time these laborers are done with the project, they either have made no money to take home, help their families or themselves, or they owe the Padrone money. There were some strikes during the time. They took, in Clinton, they took the beer away because of, workers were kind of getting agitated, striking. Pay was horrible, conditions were horrible. So the Padrones will pull their beer away, that'll fix it. Didn't go that way. Rioted, okay, we'll give you extra beer, quiet them down. Eventually what happened is some of the laborers got some voices from local prominent people and politicians, brought their grievances to the legislature in Boston, and the Padrone system was outlawed in Massachusetts. It was right towards the end of the project, but what that allowed was they could shop wherever they wanted, they could live in Clinton or other local areas, and it kind of literally freed them. They were essentially slave labor. So you can research those cases. If you just put in the Padrone system in Massachusetts in Google, you can literally read the case law and kind of go with it. It's really fascinating. So it was definitely a win because it was abolished and outlawed in Massachusetts after this. So what happens? We're doing all this work. Well, the Nashua River Valley becomes the Wachusett Reservoir. This is the valley in 1890, I want to say 1998. 6 would be too early. So we'll go over a few overviews. 1896, 1916, there's the old stone church. See how high the water is again, Route 12 Causeway, railroad tracks. Same thing, 1896, there's our engineer taking notes, looking at Scar Hill Bluff, right down the valley. Same site, 1916, now we just have a little strip of land. Generally call this area Pond Hill, Pond Point, mid-reservoir. And Bull Rock essentially is right to the left. That shoreline of those hills, that's right where left.
Which one, out there, the spring line?
Bull Rock is basically right here. Shoreline Point comes down. It's still going to go up a little bit. Shoreline Point's here. Bull Rock. So here's the valley again, 1896. We're looking westerly from South Clinton, so we are looking straight down towards Sawyer's Mills and the valley of Boylston. And really the line's probably somewhere right around that bend in the road. South Clinton is right at Boylston. Same site, 1916. So this is kind of interesting. So if you read the description, it's Wachusett Reservoir, Boylston, westerly from the entrance to Hastings Cove, right? That island right there is what will become Eagle Island. This is Gate 6. This is right up the road. You go into Gate 6, you'd be looking, at this area. Where we are now is in a no trespassing area inside of Gate 5. So this is the no trespassing shoreline, that posted shoreline, looking at the entrance to the mouth of Hastings Cove, looking at Eagle Island, and basically looking at Boylston going all the way down. So here's kind of just a general overview of the entire shared UCR and WRA water system. Again, along with Quabbin, we're a source of high quality, unfiltered water. So that's kind of the key point. We're really one of the last unfiltered water supplies really left in the world. There's a couple kind of, I think, get around it with the way they treat it, but we do not filter our water. From Wachusett, it's picked up in either the Cosgrove Aqueduct, which is that newer building that sticks out into the reservoir around the courthouse, or still the Wachusett Aqueduct. That aqueduct was built in 1896. It's still in operation. It's been rehabbed over the years. The last one was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, completely relined, and it's a redundant system. We have Cosgrove, which is a deep rock tunnel, and the aqueduct, which is more of a surface brick style aqueduct. They can both work at the same time, or they can shut one or the other off for maintenance or cleaning, and it gives it that redundancy that, God forbid, there was some type of issue or incident, they have something else to use to get the water to Marlborough. When it gets to Marlborough, it's all interconnected with the Sudbury system, and it's treated at the John J. Carroll Water Treatment Plant. They treat it with ozone balls and UV light. They do a little bit of chlorination. It's just enough to keep it through to the pipes until it gets to the tap. But by the time it gets there, that chlorination is essentially gone. So it's a testament to the land that they took to protect it for the filter. And I would say to the NDC and DCR for their watershed protection efforts, that it can still remain unfiltered. We're on a waiver from the federal government and the DEP. The Department of Environmental Protection in Massachusetts is our regulator. So we have a certain set of things that we must meet to maintain a filtration waiver. If we ever lost it, the MWRA would have to build a billions and billions of dollar filtration plant. And they don't want to do that. So that's why it may seem like, why can't I do like any of this, stuff like that I do in the state park at the reservoir? It's because we are not only beholden to ourselves, we're beholden to the MWRA and ultimately the federal government because of that filtration. There were court cases over it. The NBC was sued. So it's very, very strict. We have to maintain strict water supply protection. So really with the system, the key points are all gravity fed. We look at Quabbin all the way to the west, to your left. You can just see the size of it. It's about 6 times the size of us, of land and water. They learned their lesson, right? As they went further west, Quabbin was started by actually in the 1920s, finished in the 1940s, first filled in 1947, I want to say. They're 412 billion gallons. And look what they did with their watershed. They took everything inside of 202, 32, 122, they took it all. They didn't mess around. And as you probably all know, they disincorporated towns. They did not do that here. They did not take all of Boylston, all of West Boylston. Was that a mistake? I don't know, but they did an aggressive land purchasing program starting in the 1980s. And because of that, you see all this dark green around the Wachusett watershed now. That's from almost solely one person's efforts, Jim French. He was our land acquisition coordinator. And because of Jim, the Wachusett can go for many, many hundreds of years because we purchased so much land, you know, to be able to filter all of the rainwater and from the tributaries to get to Wachusett. Quabbin didn't mess around. They're in the 30s now. Just the way technology and information progressed, they had more information, they had more scientific, you know, data to go off of, and they knew, if we're going to make this, and this will be the last system, we must do this. And they did. So there's obviously consequences to that. We don't literally disincorporate towns in Massachusetts, but for what it was done for, I think it was effective, and it will never happen again. So. And then down below, you can see how different elevations are pushing it all the way to Boston today. So Wachusett, we hold 65 billion gallons. It seems like the average daily yield into Boston is just under 120 million gallons, but that does fluctuate. Sometimes if there's a massive fire in Boston, you can literally see the elevation of the reservoir change. You will see it drop down if you're watching the news and it's like Everett is, you know, burning down the ground. You'll see the reservoir slowly drop over there. So that number does fluctuate. So what's the watershed? Well, we're about 108 square miles. We have 37 miles of shoreline. Again, its primary purpose is drinking water. We do receive water from two main tributaries, the Quinnipoxet and Stillwater rivers. Those are both in West Boylston. Stillwater originated headwaters on Sterling. Quinnipoxet, funny enough, actually now the headwaters is the city of Worcester water supply. It's the Wachusett Reservoir in Holden, Princeton Street. That's one of their main city supplies. It's really neat to go up there. It is, unfortunately, City of Worcester is all posted. There's no trespassing on the water supply lands. But we, fortunately, people many, many years ago had the foresight to allow public recreation on this. I think it was a good decision. City of Worcester has different ideas, but they don't have to release any water to this. So you may notice if you ever fish or you hike around the Quinnipoxet River, you'll see it almost dry sometimes because City of Worcester is holding back all the water that they can. But you know, that's really typically summer to early fall, and then once we get more rainfall, we'll see the Quinnipoxet flowing. And then periodically, we do get it from Quabbin. Has anyone heard of the Ware River? So there is a watershed in the middle of Wachusett and Quabbin. There's no reservoir. There's no surface water. There's an aqueduct that takes the water from Quabbin to us and dumps out in Oakdale off of the River Road. Probably you've seen that building that sticks into the Quinnipoxet River. That's where all of Quabbin's water comes to, right? They can, in the right time of year, take water from the Ware River. They divert it back to Quabbin. It goes around baffle dams, and supposedly it takes about 3 months to work its way around until it can get to the actual intake. So that Ware River water, raw river water, has months to be able to settle down, get the turbidity down, all of the kind of contaminants or whatever they need to settle out, so it can get picked up. It can run both ways. They can directly go from Ware to Wachusett, but they don't like to because it's that raw water. They like to hold over time. Really interesting facility. It's off of 62 in Barry.
I'm not sure.
It's in Barry. It's the Ware River intake, Shack 8. It's really neat. It's also posted no trespassing, but the river drops down to a massive cycle and drops down and then gets pushed through the aqueduct line. So that's pretty cool. And that's the number. So Andy and I will we'll take questions. We also, if anyone wants to stick around, we have the link for the website where a lot of these construction photos are taken from the Real Commonwealth. So if you want to see some Boylston specific stuff, and you have a road, area, a last lead, we can try to search it for you and see if we can find something. If there's any general questions, we'll take them and then we'll kind of just.
No.
Yes. There are emergency action plans, yes. The Nashua River is one of the few rivers that flows south and north. It flows to Nashua and New Hampshire. So there are emergency action plans in place. It goes through a radio communication system down to be alerted as those flood waters would. So yes, there are emergency action plans in place, and town will be alerted as those. Hopefully that's never gonna happen. Yes.
Does water constantly come in to the Wachusett from Quabbin, or do they control that?
That's a great question. So Quabbin and Boston would like to say that all their water comes from Quabbin. That's a misnomer. All of Quabbin's water comes to us first and must travel through Wachusett. You can tell I'm biased, right? So the Quabbin aqueduct can be turned on and off, and they do. What they do with Wachusett is they like to keep it at a fixed elevation. Their kind of preferred elevation is 390 to 391. That's about 4 feet under where it would spill over. They like that because that height doesn't waste water by spilling over the spillway, but also it's high enough that it prevents algae blooms and bacteria growth. So they found over the years that's kind of the sweet spot. That's their goal. It doesn't always work that way because there could be a massive rain event, a hurricane. What was it, a couple years ago? It rained for an entire month. That's laid plans, but they do have that hydraulic fin to release water. And there, I don't want to say 2010, in March 2010, just before I started, there was actually flooding in Clinton because the reservoir overtopped. They didn't release enough water immediately from the spillway as that rain event was going. They put the fin all the way up and it overtopped the fin and the entire rest of the spillway and flooded the ball fields in Clinton. After that incident, they're much more, the MWRA is much more proactive about releasing water from rain events. We, as DCR and the state, control the lands and the surface water. The MWRA controls the infrastructure that transports the water and all of the pipes. So as soon as that water goes inside of a pipe, it's not ours anymore, it's the MWRA's. And our mission is to provide pure water to the MWRA. So, yes.
What are we drinking in Boylston?
In Boylston, you're drinking basically groundwater from wells.
How many wells?
I don't really, do you know how many Boylston was? They have one on our property right down the road on the right before you get to Route 140.
There's one that's like 813.
813.
So there's two that I know of, but
They're on our watershed. I don't know what restaurant they're on the watershed property.
isn't there another one about the Britain Street? There's a dam up there, and it needs flood control of it.
Yeah, some of the audience would know about it. We have at least two that the town has on our property, so it's kind of like a natural protection because it's in our, forest and areas. And yeah, 813, yeah, it's just inside. Yes, sir.
So, Boylston's drinking water does not come from the reservoir, is that correct?
Yeah, groundwater.
It's well water,
Well water, brown well water.
and then Boylston must have a kind of a station to process it.
I don't know what Boylston does, but it has to be treated. I don't know if it's filtered or not. I know for a fact Clinton is filtered, but I don't. That'd be a good question for your local
Water tower, one of the power outlets.
That's right. Yeah, right behind your town offices. There is a water tower there.
Isn't that police station and stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know what the function of that is, storage or something.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you don't benefit from this water, are you paying all for the collection and upkeep of the water?
So basically the way it works is everything is funded from the MWRA's ratepayers. That's what the MWRA, that's how they get their funding, and us in watershed. Back when the NBC and TPM Environmental Management, they were the state park agency, were merged in 2003 and 2004. They redid the way that watershed was funded because there was a lot of underfunding. Monies went to Boston before they went to watershed. And because of our critical role with what we do and what we supply, we are now trust funded. And that trust funding comes from the MWRA ratepayers. So if you are not drinking the water, you are not paying for anything in our system, including the land acquisition, your tax dollars, they do not go to us. It's all funded by the ratepayers. I think it's a much more equitable system now. You still benefit though, because you have you know, literally thousands of acres to recreate on and have as like a natural resource. And there's a lot of benefits that provide protection to all of the local towns, you know, the call it ecosystem. But protects all.
What's the pilot system?
So there's a couple of things. There's the pilot program, that's compensation for the land that was taken. So the way the pilot program works is if Watershed, through the trust funding, purchases land in the town, they must pay compensation. We can't pay taxes on it, but we can do a payment in lieu of taxes. That goes back to that watershed account. And the way it's set up is the payment can never be less than the previous years. So it's never going to go down. It can only go up. You can go right on Mass.gov's website, punch in the watershed pilot program, and you can see the breakdown by town of what your town was used from pilot. So it's really compensation because of lost revenue from business and residential taxes, because you have all this protected open space, but the town isn't receiving any taxes from it from potential business. So how do you compensate?